Gear up as Cash Miller and a team of accomplished guests steer you on an enlightening voyage filled with valuable tips, fresh insights, and effective strategies. Welcome to Marketing Masters, the Agency Power Show.
Hello, everyone. This is Cash Miller, your host and CEO of Titan Digital. We're here for another great episode, and I've got Cliff Blade of Blade Marketing with me. We're going to be talking about user experience when it comes to your website. You know, it's a really important topic because websites are a first impression for you, and if you don't have a good site, you're driving people away. So let's, Cliff, it is great to have you. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
It is a pleasure, Cash. Thank you so much for having us, for having me here today. A little bit about me. We started Blade Marketing and Design about 2017. Just a group of soldiers that were just trying to make it, and we just started helping business owners. That is one of our driving passions. We build websites, we do graphical design, we dabble in search engine optimization and marketing. I appreciate the invite. Thank you so much, Ken.
It's great to have you here. So we're going to get into, user experience for websites. It's like there are so many bad sites out there. It's unbelievable. You can still find sites from 2005 even. I like to, when I see a really bad one, I'll say that's like circa, whatever year it is. I think it was probably created, because it's like in old Dreamweaver or something. And it's really important, with when somebody visits your site, what you're actually going to see. It can drive people away, but it can, done right, it will drive them to you and, for them to contact you. So let's talk, Cliff, let's start with, can you define, that user experience for a website, what it should be like, what is the definition of user experience?
Thank you for that question, Cash. We could probably go down a rabbit hole, but what I would like to highlight is probably the 5 things that I find the most important. Ease of navigation. So many times people can hit a website and they just don't know where to go. So if you don't have navigation, people quickly bounce away. The load time. We are in a instant gratification society. Mm-hmm. So when a page load time, if it's loading slow, besides our friends and family, no one's going to wait. I mean,
yeah, right.
Sometimes when people build websites, they build them for themselves. And that is a good concept if you were paying yourself, but you want to get people to pay you. So I would highlight ease of navigation, page load time. I would definitely talk about mobile responsiveness. Even though we know that we all use our cell phones, some designers forget to design for that aspect. And also, I know that I just said that it's not designed for the person, but I highly encourage personalization. Why? Because what separates you from the others? The best way that you can communicate your value is by making sure that you are different from your competition in one aspect or another.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. So let's start, kind of unpacking that a little bit. And, we'll start with the first one you mentioned, that navigation. Everything most people wanted at the top and stuff. What's your thoughts on, when mobile really came along, we started seeing the hamburger and whatnot. And when we're dealing with somebody, I love, the hamburger navigation and stuff where you get rid of everything on the top on the desktop. It was meant for mobile, but it's being seen more in desktop use. What are your thoughts, about companies really embracing that? Or are we ready, from a, user standpoint? As we use the internet, we're still used to, I kind of like to say, you put the navigation in there depending on your audience. But what are your thoughts on that navigation piece of going the hamburger route versus staying to the traditional side of things?
That's a very, very good question, Cash. I would have to say that time will tell. The reason why I say time will tell is because we're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving. Um, what we thought was probably not the best right now was like the best thing popping 10 years ago. I would hate to make a broad assumption on the future. I'm more of those guys that I like to see exactly where the tide is going. I don't want to say it's good. I don't want to say it's bad. I love change.
Yeah.
I'm one of those pro change guys. If we migrate to a full hamburger menu as our regular thing, I'm great with it. If we kind of do this half, I call it half because we're trying to change traditional navigation to a more modern navigation, and that's looking like a billion different things. I'm kind of go with the flow. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your
Yeah.
question quite,
No,
Cash.
and so the way I like to see things when it comes to nav is depending on your audience. So for example, say you're a senior citizens home or something, you might want to stick with the traditional nav because you don't want to change things up too much based on what people are used to. Now,
Hmm.
I've seen more companies and websites embracing using the hamburger even on desktop. Because
Hmm.
on mobile, it's the default. That's what you're going to have.
Yes, it is.
But on the desktop side, if you still get a lot of traffic, it can be okay to stay to the traditional. But if you're a company that deals, maybe you might still get a lot of website traffic on the desktop. And if you do, but depending on sort of the age of your audience and things, it can be okay to go to that the hamburger route and such because it's it cleans it up. That's the one thing about it. It makes for
Yes.
a much cleaner experience. And I think more people are accepting and getting used to it, and they're not getting lost trying to like look in the corner
Hmm.
of it. So I, like you kind of said, you can go both ways, with it. I think you have to pay attention to who your visitor is to your website, who the likely visitor is.
Absolutely.
Um,
If I could expand on that a
yeah,
little
sure.
bit, I think that was a great point that you talked about, creating the website for the targeted audience. That is such a important thing, and that I think that goes back to one of the first things I was talking about. Sometimes the designer will create it completely for the customer, and the whole concept, the reason why people hire us is because we understand that we are creating this for a purpose, for the visitors to love the navigation, for the visitors to make that action that we're looking for.
Hmm.
So I completely agree with you, Cash.
Yeah, and then your next point, or one of your additional points, was mobile responsive.
Mhm.
Most websites have kind of the companies running them and stuff. Have figured out, yeah, you have to have the mobile, but the designer, often it's neglected because they tend to design desktop first and then go to mobile, and
Mhm.
you can move a lot of the elements around, and in some cases you need to remove pieces of what might be on
Very
the
true.
desktop. So I mean, where do you see I guess where do you see the mistakes companies are making when it comes to having a mobile experience?
That's also a very good question. A lot of the mistakes that I see with their mobile experience, uh, the elephant in the room for me is a pop up. It's like when people decided easy builders and they would throw in these pop ups, and those pop ups on mobile. Have you ever had a pop up and you just couldn't cut it off on
Oh
the
yeah,
way?
yeah,
And
certainly.
you're just like you're looking at this pop up, and what is the very first thing you get away from that website? You can't cut off the pop up.
Yeah.
So pop ups in mobile, like I'm not saying that pop ups are not useful. I'm saying that it should not be complicated. It should be small and subtle. I rarely use pop ups, or else if I do use pop ups, people will initiate. I use that little messenger bot thing
Hmm.
for a pop up that pops up a little bit on the screen. So pop ups would be number one. Second thing is when it's just not mobily aligned.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
have you ever seen people with words pushed all hard to the left
Hmm.
or pushed hard to the right, or else they don't focus on good margins when it's all very small and it's not fully laid out. I could go on for days. I'm a
Yeah.
website
Well,
owner.
yeah. Well, what you were saying about, the left and right alignment and stuff, I've seen ones where, you go to scroll down and you're using your fingers and suddenly it shifts like almost
Mm,
off your screen partway, because they
mm,
haven't like locked it in. I think, um, you know, you need to be paying attention to like actually load it on your phone and have other people
mhm,
load it on their phones, because depending on, the phone itself, it can vary. We do a lot of like usability testing, when we're done with a site, to check it on different versions and such. There's software
mhm,
obviously that can do that. So it's really important. Another thing that I always hate, because of how much traffic goes to phones now, because tablets get some, but the stats say that depending on what you do, the majority of your traffic is going to be on a phone nowadays.
mhm,
The issue that I see when you're scrolling down, you don't, like on a desktop, you can lock in the header and the phone number and stuff. And on the phone, you can do that too, but you're downsizing the screen. So what I see, because you're taking up a bunch of space if you lock in the
mhm,
header, but you need to, because you can do like a plug-in or something where you can put in the phone number on the bottom. Remember, they're on a phone. So make it easy to dial, click, find the contact information and such, versus they start scrolling and then they got to scroll all the way to the back. You can lock stuff in on the screen, and I think that's a really, big thing to do. Let's talk about, so as you're going, through the different, the experience and stuff, the design elements and such that are also on there. How are they impacting the actual user experience as well?
mm. So with design elements, I'm assuming we're talking icons, graphics, and all of those type of
Sure.
concepts, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I believe that they add to the communication. We are very big into graphical design, and I believe that attenuates or it just helps communication flow better. One of the things that I've been noticing, even though I don't use them in my websites, is the the new explosion of using emojis. We are starting to like seeing an image can can pretty much cut out a lot of words.
Hmm.
Like when someone said something and they put like a happy face underneath it, like shut the door, but they have a happy face.
Yeah. Right.
We understand that in a different fashion
Hmm.
than just having straight words because the imagery adds to the communication. I'm a big believer of that.
Yeah.
Imagery adds to communication. And the reason why I'm talking about emojis when we're talking about graphical images is I'm just trying to express how we see things and automatically correlate. It cuts off half of the processing time. When we see a great design,
Mm.
we'll focus on the design and the words, which are important, especially in Google, but the words don't hold more as much value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. Because imagery has always been used, to relay, and reinforce messaging, right? And we have very short attention spans, especially with websites. It's an interesting thing. Like I know that if I'm reading content on a website, okay, a news article, sports article, or something, I'm probably going to skip part of it. If I read a book, I'm going to read all of it. I'm not going to skip across anything. But we have like trained ourselves to do that. So what you want using that imagery, you're taking the time to really relay in an additional way certain messaging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
So okay, so there's, when you're looking at that imagery, or I mean, what are some ways, I guess, or some elements on there that you can use to enhance messaging, from your experience?
Mm, mm. So I do play it situational because, like, when I'm working with people that are inside of the pet industry, like your veterinarians, your parapooper scoopers. That's a, a company that picks up
Yeah.
dog poop. So I utilize different concepts. Like with that, it's going to be more pet themed. So besides just
Yeah.
throwing in a picture, I would find a graphical solution, like a graphical icon, or something that's going to represent that and communicate that well. But that's not always going to work if we're talking about like a hospital or more traditional people that are more white collared, and they just don't have that humor.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that it's kind of situational. It's kind of industry specific. I
Mm-hmm.
have seen dentists utilize funny icons, but that is like their business brand. So if I could take that back, I would say it is brand specific as far as the way that I could employ those images or those graphics.
Yeah, it's kind of like using the imagery, the different graphics. You can kind of tell a story in a sense about that particular company and that brand, and some
Mhm.
might be involve humor, and some might not. And I think it comes apart across with a lot of websites and such. Based on the design, what they are trying to convey as a whole.
Mhm.
A hospital might be a much more simplified, kind of cold looking design, and where it's more utilitarian versus um, something that's going to be more could be humor related or something, and there's
Pediatric.
yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, totally. Because they're
Mhm.
trying to lighten it up, and veterinarians and things like that. Because
Mhm.
they want it to be more friendly looking
Mhm.
and not so sterile. I say a
Absolutely.
hospital and a lawyer are pretty. They're going to be more sterile. But yeah,
Absolutely.
a vet, you want
Because
dogs
that's their
everywhere.
brand. They're trying to communicate that professionalism.
Yeah,
And I think that that's what makes us so important. You got to have professionals that understand your brand and can
right.
communicate it well.
Yeah, no, totally. Okay, so let's get into some of the elements, that really matter, for websites and what people are experiencing. Because we think of in terms of graphics and things like that, but there's other things, that really matter. So, website load speed. What are your thoughts there? Because, I mean, like I say, we have short attention spans.
That's very, very true. And I'm not knocking any platform, and I'm not saying any platform is bigger or better. I'm just saying that website load time is a very high priority. And the reason why it's a high priority, most people don't think of it. The website is being rated. I know that we talk about first page rankings,
Hmm.
but when we say first page rankings, we're really talking that yours has been ranked higher than others. And part of that categorization process is going to be website load speed.
Yeah.
Like that is a criteria. So if you want your website to perform better, not only keeping your
Hmm.
audience attention, but if you want to get up inside of that first page rankings, part of that is your website load speed. It's not the only ranking, but it's a very important ranking signal.
Yeah, totally, because it's, you're looking at it from you're building your website for essentially two audiences.
Mhm.
One is the human that's going to visit that site, and again, short attention span. So the quicker it loads up, the better the experience is. The other, you're building it for Google because it's taking as a factor, because Google, will hammers home the point of they want to prioritize and rank higher sites that provide not only great content but also that better user experience. And it can't necessarily, like, yeah, it's still an algorithm, so it's not necessarily judging the imagery and things like that. But load time, it can judge. It can see how fast something comes up, internal pages, the home page, and such. And so if you bog it down and it's going to load slowly, that's going to be an issue. So if you get it to load fast, you're getting a double benefit. If it's loading slow, you're taking a double penalty.
Yes, very true. Very true, Cash.
So, what are some of the what if we're talking about loading fast? What are some of the things that people need to take into consideration?
Um,
Like pieces of the site.
so I specialize in WordPress. I do understand that there are other building platforms out there that you can just take any size imagery and throw it on there. But with WordPress, there are image size standards. And I would be a very big proponent of image size recommendations. I would be a big proponent in utilizing tools that can make your website loader faster by minimizing CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. There
Hmm.
are but having access to these tools are very exclusive to people that are more familiar with WordPress or people that are very familiar with a traditional build out. uh, I do understand that there are limitations with easy building platforms.
Yeah, like there are limitations with those platforms, things like a GoDaddy website or a Squarespace or things like that. And of course, anytime you do a website with that versus doing with WordPress, you're married to their system. So
Very true.
whatever limitations it has, you're kind of stuck with. WordPress, of course, is like the most popular for websites in general. Now it's got hundreds of millions of sites or whatever now built with it. But there are things you can do. So image size is hugely important. Video, if you're using it on your website, you have to be very careful. A lot of people will use a system like Vimeo, maybe put the videos on YouTube because they're hosted elsewhere and you're just pulling in a feed. So that can be a better route to go. Whereas if you load the video directly on the site, that's going to be an issue. And so there are tricks to get the load speeds much higher and reduce the burden. And like you mentioned, the way it's coded too, like minimizing the CSS and such. A lot of people, you have to watch out for like WordPress themes that are like pre-bought. You have to be careful with them. There's some very great, wonderful looking themes, but you have to remember that they're also being built to do a lot of things, and sometimes they don't really pay attention to the load speed, as much. They want flexibility with it to be able to sell it as many times as possible. Yeah. What are your thoughts on themes? Let's say with different ones. Just not specifics, but like themes in general.
So I have always been a big proponent of things because it allows people to see exactly what they're getting, but it's a give and take. It's kind of like what you're saying. They are pre-made, and even though pictures can, I hate sometimes how they have, like, they call it a plumber theme or
Oh
this
yeah,
or that theme, because really, in all actuality, if you're a true professional, anything is just a block of clay.
yeah,
You can mold it.
sure.
But I would have to say, just off the top of my head, I like them. It provides good information. It allows the sales process to be easy. But I also love individual, what is it called? Like unique builds that are specifically custom designs.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't think of it. But I also like custom designs. It really depends on what the client wants. I'm one of those guys where I don't have a hat to throw in the ring. I'm going to work with whoever as long as we can meet certain criteria.
Okay, cool. So let's talk common mistakes for a minute.
Mm.
What are some of the things that you see that are very common for that user experience, that mistakes that keep happening, that just they're made all the time?
One of them is going to cost people money. So let's talk about what costs people money. A complicated checkout process. What do I mean by a complicated checkout process? Sometimes people think too hard into their website and they have you go to so many different avenues and revenues and different areas. I remember it was just the other day, I was just trying to get a new watch and I found this, someone was advertising on Instagram, I believe.
Hmm.
And when I clicked and I went inside of there because I liked the look of the watch, and I just could not purchase. And then after the first minute or two of me trying to figure out where the purchase process was, or else everything looked great, except for you just couldn't purchase.
Jeez. Yeah.
Everything looked great. I mean, I'm a web developer. I'm telling you, it looked good, but I just could not find how to navigate to purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's costing people money. Something else that's costing people money, and I know we're so much in an instant, like everyone wants everything just constantly given to us, that we are starting to get away from content. Like we like I understand that I'm getting closer to like the older generation and this and that, but Google and Bing, they need words to rate the authority of your website.
Yeah.
And I understand. Oh, well, no one's going to read this content anyways. That's only your perception.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Only.
right. Yeah. You might not have a human reading it, but it's being read.
Yes, yes. So, like complicated checkout process. People are starting to leave off words to try to minimize content, and that's great. If the ranking systems would only stop caring about words.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about poor navigation. I guess that kind of feeds into my very first point when I was talking about a complicated checkout process. Non-responsive designs, like you were talking about, people that build only for a desktop, and it does not convert well to a tablet, does not convert well to mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, mobile's getting crazy because what is that new Samsung phone that opens up into like a middle?
Sure.
Yeah, there's like
that one would have a really weird screen size, something we're not used to necessarily coding for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, the world is absolutely changing, and these things that we're highlighting eventually, hopefully, they'll get fixed. Or I mean, the world is mean. I love to think of user experience as the unfiltered person, because even though we all believe that we're good, genuine people, when we actually reach our phones or else we're on the computer and no one's watching us, that is the most honest we are.
Yeah.
We want to look at something, and if we don't like it, we get rid of it.
Sure. Yeah, totally. When it comes to like some of the mistakes, that I've seen, I always want that you put yourself in the shoes of the visitor. Take time to visit and say, okay, if I was a consumer, and I wanted to contact this company, it's a service business, they sell a product, whatever it is, actually take the time to go through your own, the process that's been created, on your website. Because, for example, the biggest thing I see constantly is contact info. Like for us, it's like standing instructions, put the phone number in the header. Okay. Contact forms are the same way. When you're burying them, it's a fact. If it's on a desktop, and this of course will happen on mobile too, 100% of people, we have what's known as above the fold. So the part that loads on your screen when the website, when you first go there, right? So that is 100% seen. Above the fold shows up on your screen. Of course it's there. So if you don't have your phone number or contact information in the header, I think that is like you can't do that. You have to have it there unless for whatever reason you don't want them to actually contact you. And and I see people with forms too, if they're going to use them or if they're going to have a button that will like have a pop-up form or lead to a form or whatever, they're hiding the stuff, they're burying it. By the time you get to the bottom of the website, to the footer nav and stuff and whatever's above it, only 10% of the people or so actually get there. Everything else is, like I say, as you scroll down, whether it's on a desktop or a phone, you lose people. And that's just the natural progression of things. So you have to have that most important, your calls to action, stuff like that have to be above the fold as much as possible. And then the other thing I see when it comes to like contact info, they give it multiple steps. And it's like, no, that you can't do that. That's why even if you have a contact us page, you're not trying to drive people there. You want them to, I say, if your phone numbers like on mobile aren't clickable, which they should be, but if they're not for some reason, that's a no-no, because, you can't, you've got to make it easy for them. They say if they've got to navigate to another page, so contact us here in a button, but that button is going to take you to another page. Well, if for some reason their internet connection or whatever, the page doesn't load quick enough, you can lose them there versus, this is where I do like using pop-ups, but it's not an automatic one. It's they click the contact us button and then the form might pop up, something like that. That is okay. Because as long as you can, X out of it easily and such, but it's not an automatic. They chose to. So I like using those occasionally because it's like, it comes up on the page you're on. You're not navigating to another page. So I see a lot of times where it's contact related stuff. And that's the simplest thing, but people will miss it all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the way that you're talking about how like our conversation is that we are redefining the pop-up instead of that intrusive pop-up that kind of covers your whole screen and you're like, I can't get out. And I speak of it because a few easy building platforms, they offer it out there like candy. And I understand. I didn't just wake up with all of this experience. I had to go through trial and tribulation, and I had to identify, people don't really like that.
Like I say, if there's an intent where it's not automatic, I chose to have it, and it's either I navigate them to another page or I have something come up right in front of them, that pop-up can load a little faster than necessarily navigating to another page. But if it's something that is like, you're planning it in front of people and they didn't necessarily ask for it, there's a purpose for pop-ups. It's just, people can't overdo it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk, ADA compliance. There has been a proliferation of lawsuits and such, out there because of, somebody goes to a website and it's not really, they feel, if they have a disability or something, it's not very user accessible, for them. And so we've seen a lot of lawsuits over I saw a stat once where since like 2013, the number of lawsuits has climbed from something like, in 2013 it was like 10 or something, to by 2020 it was like 6,000, lawsuits across the country and such. So, how important is it? What are your thoughts on companies, making sure that they're compliant?
Thank you for that great question, Cash. That could go down a rabbit hole and it can go so many ways. So I'll sit over there and focus on at least three major points. Inclusivity. I'm sorry, I couldn't speak today. Just that word.
Inclusivity,
So we want to ensure that everyone can utilize the website. My clients want people on the website, and those people that are on the website, they're on the website for a specific purpose. We want to ensure that everyone can utilize it. So so inclusive. I won't try and say the icity because I'll mess that up. So legal requirements. Legal requirements can go in so many ways because we have 50 states and there are different rules for different states. And I don't want to pigeonhole myself talking about one particular state or another particular state, but there is a legal requirement depending on the state that you live in. I don't want to say it's all 50 because I've been doing my research and different states have different thresholds. But I definitely want to say that there is absolutely a legal requirement and you can be sued if you do not meet the ADA requirements. You would have to speak to your legal counsel as far as like the actual details, because someone over in, I don't know, Wyoming could be listening to this and they might have a different set of standards. If that's fair. So I don't want to touch on the legal requirement, but there is a legal requirement for certain states. And let's talk about just the SEO benefit, because we forget that there is an SEO benefit to it. Just ensuring that the all images for the text is ensuring that there is a logical content structure. All of these things are good. So if I could just recap these three, the SEO benefit is very good. I would recommend it. The legal requirement, it depends on the state. And what was I talking about with the very first one? I'm sorry. I think inclusiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also for those, that are not familiar, like I say, this started, almost a decade ago or so, that these, lawsuits, and some big companies like Domino's, Winn-Dixie and such, they've been sued, successfully sued, in fact. But in a lot of cases, and kind of goes to your point of, depends on the court you're in, what state and whatnot, a lot of them are failing. But what's happening is there are some unscrupulous lawyers out there that go find somebody that's disabled. They say, hey, go to the site real quick. Yeah, and they do it. And basically they're kind of influencing them and say, look, these people have now wronged you because it's not accessible or whatever. And the lawyer offers to, do something, a split, of course, on the settlement. What the lawyer is trying to do is they're not actually intent. They'll write a letter to whatever company they're targeting. And I've heard of instances. I've got a few clients that before they became clients were sued, for it, but they never end up in court. Okay, what the lawyer is trying to do is get that company to settle for anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. They'll come out and say, hey, we want, make a demand of so much money. They'll end up settling at a lower price, for it. But, so the lawyer doesn't want to take you to court. They just want to be able to send some letters off and settle, but they need a plaintiff to do so. And they find somebody and say, hey, you'll get, X amount of dollars for it. If they end up in court, they're likely to lose, but they don't end up in court because the court costs for the defendant will be so high that it's cheaper to settle. I've got one that's a mutual insurance company, and I know that before we took them on as a client, this happened to them, and they ended up paying $6,000 to that lawyer. And then the same lawyer will go and target somebody else, either in that industry or another industry. It's been happening a lot in Florida. There's a few lawyers that are intentionally targeting like insurance agencies and such for this. And, they don't have much recourse in defending themselves because it's still cheaper to settle. But the thing that can keep them away, so I like to, there are some different systems, especially for WordPress and whatnot. You can do a whole thing on ADA compliance for your website, go through page by page, and there are things you can do. But there are some companies that have come out with systems that you can install their system. Some are paid, per month and whatnot, subscription based. Some have free options that will do enough. Okay. And when you install one of these systems, you're able to put it. One of the things you get is the icon that allows, because what the system actually does is when you click the icon, the person that's disabled can then change font sizes, change colors so they can read it better. They can make all sorts of modifications to your site for them specifically. When they leave, your site has never changed for anybody else. It's only being modified for them in the moment. As soon as they leave, they come back, they'd have to do it again. It's not touching your code or anything like that. But what I like to say is when you put that ADA on there, you've got the handicap symbol. You're scaring away the lawyers now, because as soon as they see that, you're not low-hanging fruit.
Very true.
They're going to have to actually do, if they intend on suing you, they're going to have to actually prove that you're not compliant. So that means you're going to go to court. And most of them, if you say, I am compliant, I am not paying you any settlement, go ahead, try and take me to court. You can countersue. And, like I say, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not making recommendations here, but you'll have a strong case on your side as long as you've done those things.
And some of those tools, they actually come with packages that includes a lawyer, or else
right.
They will provide you legal counsel in the event. I'm very familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for expanding on it. I misunderstood the context of the question.
No, you were right. No, you were right on. Because that was the idea. Like I say, there's a bunch of things, that people like like I say, what you mentioned with, different states, there are different things for compliance. But there's also, in a lot of states, it'd be a no-go, but you have to defend yourself, and
Mhm.
that's the issue, so lawyers are scaring people into paying these settlements and such, not very ethical lawyers, of course, but, so ADA compliance matters. You want to protect yourself. Plus, your other point, you are making your site more usable for those that are disabled, and so that's a good thing too. It is something you should do, even if you're not worried about the lawyers.
Very, very, very true. I was talking to, I have a client over in Clarksville that work with disabled people. So if you work with disabled people, it's kind of like it's like a unsaid.
Yeah, you kind of have to do these things, right? Yeah. Okay, so we're at the end of our show today. What last pieces of advice when it comes to usability on a website? What would you say to sum it all up?
I believe that we could go down a lot of rabbit holes, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that after your website is created, be your customer. Be your customer.
Mm,
Pretend like you have no idea of like your company or anything like that. Take a day before you actually launch it and go through your website. Even if someone builds it for you, go through your website. Check out the buttons, check out the links. I had a customer tell me one time, and it made a light bulb go off in my head. He said, "Yeah, I'm just not quite sure about my customer journey." And I
yeah,
said, "Yeah, okay, well then let's walk through this customer journey together."
yeah,
And by going through that customer journey, or else the different paths that customer journey can take, because we all know that we love people to come to our homepage, but that's not where everyone enters. Uh,
mm,
yeah, if your page is available on the internet, people can go hit your contact page first. People can go to your about page first. They rarely go to your about page first, but
but it's possible. And actually, that
but it
the about page is the second most visited page on any website.
is.
If it has one.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's part of that know, like, and trust.
Yeah,
They're trying to know you, like you, and trust you online.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Like I say,
But just going through that customer journey, we'll sit over there and provide you that